Hi, I'm Lunette. I was the bride in white, until my sister smashed soda across my chest in front of 200 guests. People gasped. Some looked away. My mother said nothing. And within seconds, my husband calmly asked her to leave. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how long she'd been planning it, how many little mistakes led to that moment. My name left off the invitations, my best friend uninvited, the family heirloom stolen, and now, she's in prison. I'm finally free. But how do you move forward when the people who hurt you still carry your name? Would you open the letter they sent from behind bars? Or would you do what I did? Put it in a drawer and close it forever. The moment I stepped through the doors of the Tarrytown banquet hall, I felt like a guest at someone else's wedding. The chandeliers glowed soft gold across the parquet floors, the scent of baked salmon and rosemary potatoes wafting from the kitchen, but none of it calmed the knot in my stomach. I smiled at the greeter who took my wrap. She was kind, warm, a stranger. At least she made eye contact. Callista didn't. My sister stood across the room, wearing a satin cream dress that hugged her like it was custom-tailored for this exact moment. Her lips curled upward when she saw me, but it wasn't a smile. It was a smirk, practiced and razor-thin, the kind of expression she used in every picture she posted online, right before the caption, "Some of us lead, some of us follow." She raised her champagne glass slightly. I didn't return the gesture. I made my way toward the reserved seating area, past distant relatives and colleagues from Darian's work. The energy shifted as I approached. Quiet nods, half hugs. That awkward silence of people who aren't sure if they're witnessing something private or rehearsed. When I reached the front, I stopped cold. My name card wasn't at the main family table. It was tucked at the corner of a long side table, right next to the restrooms. I blinked. Darian's name was nowhere nearby either. I looked up to see Callista chatting effortlessly with our parents at the center table, her laugh echoing just loud enough to feel intentional. My seat was closer to the servers than to my own mother. A family friend I hadn't seen in years leaned over and whispered, "Honey, why aren't you up there with your mom?" I didn't answer. I just smiled the way Southern women do when they're too furious to speak. I walked back to the entrance and found the event coordinator. "Could you double-check the seating chart for me?" I asked politely. He nodded, pulled out his clipboard, scanned the list. Yes, Miss Braun, you're at table 8 with the college friends and plus ones." "Miss Braun," I swallowed hard. "That's actually not correct," I said calmly. "I'm the bride. I think someone may have made an assumption." "Oh, I apologize. I'll see what I can do. Thank you." I returned to my table, where my salad was already wilting. The butter had melted into the roll. Just as I took my seat, a former co-worker of Darian's leaned across the table with a big smile. "I got your invitation. It was gorgeous. The gold leaf on Callista Braun and Darian Holt invite you looked like something out of Town Country. She really went all out." I blinked. "Sorry, the invitation said, what?" She pulled it from her clutch. The glossy card shimmered in the low light. And there it was. Callista's name printed above Darian's, in large script. Mine, if present at all, was nowhere visible. My heart thudded once, twice, like someone had slammed a door shut in my chest. I didn't approve that version." "Oh," the woman said awkwardly, sensing my tone. "Maybe it was a draft?" Verity, my mother, appeared beside me. "Probably just a printing oversight," she said, with that brisk finality that shut down questions she didn't want to answer. "You saw this before it went out?" I asked. She smoothed her clutch against her hip. "Darling, you were so busy. Callista offered to handle the invitations. I assume she ran it by you." "Of course," I whispered. "Of course she did." I didn't finish my salad. The vinaigrette tasted bitter anyway. The rest of the dinner was a slow boil, conversations dressed as compliments, smiles that sliced. At one point, Callista stopped by my table and tilted her head. "It's so sweet how you managed to plan all this while keeping your little job." "It's a non-profit," I replied. "Yes, such a giving soul. Not all of us are built for that." She walked away before I could respond. Darian noticed. He always noticed. He squeezed my hand beneath the table. We'll get through this. Just you and me. I wanted to believe that. I really did. After the entrees, people began to mingle, wine glasses clinking in every direction. I slipped away to the far end of the banquet room, pretending to admire the flowers. Was this my wedding rehearsal? Or a carefully curated campaign? Maybe I was never supposed to be the bride. Maybe I was just the prop in someone else's photo shoot. They'd always called me the quiet one, the agreeable one, the girl who played the flute while Callista danced center stage. But tonight, that girl felt very far away, and the woman wearing her shoes was done being staged. A server approached with a drink. He placed it beside a crisp, white napkin bearing my name. Except it didn't say my name. It read, Miss Braun, not Mrs. Holt-to-be, not Lunette, just Braun, the name I was about to shed. I picked up the napkin and crushed it in my palm. Then I looked up, and there she was, stepping onto the stage, perfectly timed, perfectly lit. As always, her voice slid right into the air, smooth as silk, cutting through the light hum of conversation like it was waiting for its cue. Just a few words for my baby sister, she said. I didn't need to look. I already knew it was her. That voice, the one that always found the light in the room and pulled every gaze to it, was impossible to miss. My grip tightened around the napkin in my hand, the one still crumpled from the label mistake. I didn't uncrumple it. I didn't need to. Her entrance was enough of a headline. She stood by the stage now, holding the microphone with the poise of someone used to being listened to. Her eyes scanned the room like a preacher before delivering a sermon. Her lips curled just enough to pretend she was about to say something sweet. I've known Lunette since the day she came home in a diaper with a bow tied around her bald little head, Callista began, and the crowd chuckled politely. She was always the quieter one, the dreamer. I was the one with the dance recitals and science fairs, but she once tried to sell candles made from old crayons. Remember that, Mom? 2 weeks in and the whole house smelled like burnt Crayola. Laughter, not cruel, not loud, just enough to make the back of my neck stiffen. Darian looked at me across the table. His expression didn't move, but his eyes said, "You okay?" I gave the tiniest nod. Callista was still going. She's always had that big heart, our Nana Banana. That's what we called her growing up, our sweet, clumsy little Nana. Remember when she fell off the stage in the 3rd grade spelling bee? And still insisted on spelling accommodate while sitting on the floor? A louder laugh this time, even from the family friends who barely knew me, and there it was, the nickname, Nana Banana. I felt like a floorboard had given way beneath my feet. I hadn't heard that name in over a decade. Not from her, not from anyone. It was the kind of thing that stuck to your skin long after the bruise faded, something you grow out of and leave behind, unless someone's determined to pin it back on you in front of 24 people you've invited to your own rehearsal dinner. I reached for my water and took a small sip, keeping my eyes down. She wrapped up with a flourish, her voice softening. But in all seriousness, she said, pressing a hand to her chest, I couldn't be prouder of my baby sister. She's come such a long way, and she found someone who really sees her. She looked straight at Darian, not me, not the couple, him. Darian, welcome to the circus. Another laugh. The microphone clicked as she handed it back to the MC, and just like that, she descended the stage, glowing with the applause of people who didn't know they were clapping for a subtle kind of cruelty. I sat still, letting the sounds swirl around me. It felt like I was watching someone else's movie, and I was the extra in the background who'd never get named in the credits. It was strange what memories stirred in those moments. I drifted back to 5th grade. School assembly. We were supposed to do a sister act, a dance number to that old Jackson 5 song. We practiced for weeks, but the moment we stepped on stage, Callista took over, changed the steps, pulled the spotlight. I spent the whole routine chasing her feet. When it ended, people cheered. Not for us, for her. I stood beside her, out of breath and invisible. Somehow, tonight felt the same. Except this time, I wasn't 11, and I wasn't going to smile through it. I excused myself, walking slowly toward the hallway near the bathrooms. I didn't want to cry. That wasn't it. I just needed the noise to stop. I needed space where her voice didn't echo. In the mirror, under the pale restroom lights, I looked at my reflection. My makeup still held. Hair, still neat, dress, still clean. But something in my eyes felt tired. Not sad, not broken, just worn. They all still saw me as that girl. The sidekick, the shadow, the harmless one who let things go. But tomorrow, I become something else. I straightened up, smoothed my dress, and stepped out. Darian was waiting, just around the corner. "Do you want to leave?" he asked quietly. "No," I said, my voice steady. "I want to remember this. Every word." He gave a short nod, not surprised, just aligned. We didn't head back to the table right away. We stood near the hallway, just the two of us. His hand on my lower back, grounding me. When we finally returned, dessert was being served. Callista floated from table to table like she owned the room. Her glass never empty, her smile practiced. No one seemed to notice the slight twist in her mouth when she saw me back in the room, like she'd expected me to stay gone longer. I didn't look away. I held her gaze. That's when she leaned in, close enough so only I could hear. "Don't wear heels tomorrow," she whispered. "You always trip." It wasn't concern, it was a dare. Her voice lingered in my ear like poison wrapped in sugar. "Put it next to the cake," I said, and walked away. I didn't need to check if she heard me. The way the planner stiffened, then nodded quickly, was enough. People always knew when something was meant to stay between two women in the same bloodline, yet miles apart in understanding. That morning, the sunlight came in through my kitchen window as I stirred my coffee with a hand that wasn't shaking, yet I'd barely slept, but the exhaustion didn't matter. Today, I wasn't just putting on a dress. I was reclaiming something I should have never had to fight for in the first place. Darian had already left for the venue. Tradition. He'd kissed my forehead and said, "I'll see you at the altar. Don't let her write this part." He didn't say her name. He didn't have to. When I arrived an hour later, the venue was already buzzing. Florists arranging centerpieces, waitstaff setting glasses, the photographer checking light against the tall windows. I stepped in quietly, taking in the space I had imagined 100 times. But the version in my head had always felt warmer. As I made my way toward the display tables, my stomach twisted. There was something off, something missing. The gallery was supposed to include a series of childhood photos, ones I had carefully selected with the planner weeks ago. They were meant to show the journey, not just mine and Darian's, but mine, period. The girl I used to be. The woman standing now. My eyes stopped at the end of the table. The picture of me and Callista, sitting in matching denim overalls on the front porch of our grandparents' house, holding lemonades we made ourselves, it was gone. I scanned the rest, not a trace. The planner noticed my pause. "Is everything all right, Miss Braun? Sorry, Miss Caro." I didn't correct her. "I don't see the photo that was supposed to go here," I said, pointing at the space between two frames. She looked down at her checklist, then cleared her throat. "Your sister mentioned it didn't match the aesthetic." "Of course she did. It's a wedding, not a product launch," I murmured. The planner blinked, unsure whether to respond. I waved it off gently. "Can you have it reprinted and placed?" I emailed the file. "It's in the folder labeled Family. Put it next to the cake." She nodded. "Yes, ma'am." I kept walking, my heels clicking a little too hard on the tile, like punctuation marks in a letter I didn't remember writing. Before I made it to the dressing suite, my phone buzzed. I pulled it from my clutch. A text from Camilla, my roommate from college. Did I miss something? Thought I was invited. Got an email last week saying it was a private family-only ceremony. Confused but wishing you the best anyway. I blinked. My fingers tightened around the phone. Camilla had been at every important moment of my life for the past decade. My graduation. My first job interview. The night I sobbed on her couch over a guy who ghosted me. She helped me pick out my shoes for this wedding. She was supposed to be in the second row. And now? I called her. "Cam? Lunette? Oh my God, I didn't mean to bother you today." No. You didn't do anything wrong. You said you got an email? Yeah, it came from a wedding account. Said the ceremony would be scaled back due to venue limitations and that only immediate family would attend. I swallowed hard. You were on the list. You were always on the list. Silence. Then she sighed. I knew something felt weird. That doesn't sound like you at all. I'll call you after today, I said. We're going to fix this. You don't owe me anything, but I'm here when you're ready. I ended the call and stood still for a moment, trying to gather the pieces. Callista had access to the email guest list platform. She had access. I didn't need a forensics team. I just needed a mirror. I needed to stop pretending like she didn't mean it. When I finally stepped into the dressing suite, the dress hanging on the door was not the one I picked. It was off-white, with capped sleeves and pearls along the neckline. Beautiful, heavy, familiar. The kind of dress they tell you you're supposed to want. The kind my mother wore, the kind my grandmother wore, and apparently the kind my sister wore 6 years ago at a wedding that never happened. I stood staring at it, jaw clenched. My own dress, a lighter, more modern piece that felt like me, was nowhere in sight. My mother walked in, sipping from a glass of iced tea like she was stopping by for lunch. Oh good, they brought it out early, she said, glancing at the gown. This isn't the dress I ordered. She frowned. Well, it's the family dress. It means something. I thought you'd wear it. Your sister did. She also wore my name on the invitations, I said evenly. Her eyes narrowed. Lunette, don't start. Not today. Don't start? I repeated. What exactly do you think is happening? She placed her tea on the vanity and folded her arms. Callista put a lot of time into this. I know she's strong-willed, but she means well. She's just passionate, and you've always been sensitive. There it was. I stepped closer. She uninvited my best friend. She removed photos of me from my own wedding. And now she's decided I should wear her memory like it's mine. She just wants the day to be beautiful. She wants it to be hers. My mother's expression didn't change. That was the worst part. She wasn't surprised. This wasn't new to her. I'm not putting it on, I said, and I'm not being erased. For a moment, we stared at each other. Then she turned away, picked up her tea, and left. I exhaled slowly and sat down. The makeup artist came in shortly after, chipper and oblivious, asking about lighting and lashes. I nodded through it. My skin buzzed, not with nerves, but something quieter, like grit being stirred from the bottom of a glass. I pulled out my phone and opened a photo album labeled Proof. It had screenshots, emails, drafts. I didn't know why I'd been collecting them. Maybe I had always known today would come, that I'd need to remember it wasn't paranoia if they were really trying to cut you out of your own life. Just before heading out to meet Darian for the first look photos, I turned to the planner again. I'd like to revise the gallery, add the photo back. The one your sister— Yes, that one. Put it by the cake, not tucked in a corner. She nodded. And make sure my guests aren't redirected, I added. If anyone says we're at capacity, they're lying. Her eyes widened slightly, then she gave a sharp nod. By the time I stepped out into the early afternoon light, the air felt heavier. Not with humidity, but with clarity. I could see it now. The pattern. It wasn't dramatic. It was careful. And today, I wasn't letting it continue. But this time, it was red. Not wine. Not lipstick. Not part of the pattern. Just below the left shoulder seam of my dress, where the fabric folded into a neat pleat, was a smear the color of dried blood. Only stickier. I touched it lightly with the edge of a tissue. It smelled faintly sweet, like cherry soda. I didn't flinch. I didn't gasp. That part of me was retired. Instead, I walked calmly toward the bathroom and locked the door behind me. In the mirror, the red streak stared back. It wasn't large, but it was bold, deliberate. Whoever did it, no, she, knew exactly where it would land. Not enough to ruin the whole dress, just enough to disturb the photo, enough to shift attention. That's what Callista always aimed for. Not destruction, distortion. I reached for a wet cloth and gently dabbed the spot. It faded slightly, but not fully. I took a deep breath and stepped back, remembering something she once said to me in high school. Nothing sticks unless it's placed right. At the time, she was talking about false eyelashes. But now I understood. She'd been rehearsing her whole life for moments like these. I returned to the bridal suite, composed on the outside. Inside, a current buzzed low and steady, like a hum through the floor. 10 minutes later, while I sat letting the makeup artist do her work, the door cracked open. A familiar voice came through. "Just dropping this off." It was the dressing assistant. She hung the garment bag next to mine and walked out without another word. I knew better than to ignore it. Once the makeup artist stepped out to grab hairspray, I opened the zipper halfway. There, inside, was a folded note pinned to the hanger with a bobby pin. "Hope this one fits your role better. Love, your big sister." No signature needed, no explanation given. I stared at the note for a long moment. Then I folded it in half, placed it neatly inside my purse, and zipped it closed. People sometimes ask how you stay calm when someone keeps trying to unmake you. I think it's not about calmness, it's about clarity. When you've spent enough years in someone else's frame, you stop reacting, you start documenting. An hour later, as I moved through the hallway toward the main foyer, a friend from work stopped me gently. "Hey, you okay?" I nodded. "Fine." She hesitated, then leaned in a little. "I ran into Emily outside." "She was surprised to be here, said she hadn't heard from you in a while." I blinked. "Emily?" I hadn't spoken to her in months. She and Darian had mutual friends. We'd lost touch naturally. "She said she didn't realize you were getting married," my friend continued. "But she did say something odd. She mentioned she'd dated Darian briefly, years ago." My breath caught, not because of what she said, but because of what she didn't say. Callista. I should have seen it sooner. Of course it wasn't Emily. It was Callista. She had dated Darian, briefly, before we ever did. And now she was using Emily to drop that breadcrumb, hoping it would derail me. She never told me herself, never gave me that basic respect. But she made sure the whisper would find its way back. Of course she did. I smiled tightly. "Thanks for letting me know." My friend gave a kind squeeze to my arm and walked off. I found a quiet spot just off the garden path and stood still for a long moment, breathing through the air that now felt thicker, heavier. When we were little, Callista used to steal my dolls, but never outright. She'd borrow them, rename them, dress them in her clothes, and then she'd say, "They look better this way, don't they?" She hadn't changed, only the tools had. Now it was emails, seating charts, wardrobe choices, and men. I didn't want to carry this into the ceremony, but I knew I had to confront her. Not tomorrow, not next week, now. I stepped back inside and found her near the refreshment table, alone for once. "Got a second?" I asked. She turned, sipping from a champagne flute. "Of course, the bride wants to speak." "Cut it," I said quietly but firmly. "No more games." She raised a brow. "Games? I thought I was being helpful." I saw the stain. Her smirk twitched. "Accidents happen." "And the note?" She sipped again. "Just a little reminder of what matters. Family, tradition." "And Emily?" I asked. Her eyes lit with amusement. "Oh, that. It was years ago. Barely counts. You're really going to let ancient history ruin your special day?" "No," I said. "But if you do one more thing, if you so much as adjust a flower petal without being asked, I will not stay quiet." She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "You've never had a voice, Lunette. Why start now?" I held her gaze. "Because this time, you're not the only one being listened to." A shadow passed behind us, Darian. He stepped up, his presence steady. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. She looked at him, then back at me. "Cute," she said. "The united front. We'll see how long that lasts." "Longer than this performance," I replied. Her smile thinned, but she didn't speak again. She walked away, heels tapping softly like a retreat she wouldn't call one. Darian turned to me. "You all right?" I nodded. She heard me. She needed to. We walked together down the corridor, stopping just before the suite. I stepped inside alone for a moment, needing space. As I picked up the dress again, something caught my eye. A second stain. Near the waist this time, red, sticky, and unmistakably soda. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I pulled out my phone, opened the photo album labeled Proof, and took another picture. Then I called the planner. There's a second mark, I told her. Can you find someone from the cleaning team quietly and have them steam this out? I have backup fabric in the car. My friend Marla knows where it is. I'm so sorry, she said, voice trembling. Don't be, I replied. Just help me get it right. The rest, I'll handle. As I hung up, I looked at the reflection in the mirror. Not just a bride, not just someone's sister. Someone who saw everything clearly. Finally. She was waiting by the arch, like a storm dressed in silk. I could see her from halfway across the garden, perfectly poised beside a spray of white roses and eucalyptus, not moving, not blinking, just watching. It was minutes before the ceremony was set to begin. The music was soft, the guests were taking their seats, and the light outside had shifted from harsh daylight to something golden and forgiving. Everything looked picture perfect, but it didn't feel that way to me. I stood just beyond the entrance of the bridal suite, looking through the archway, trying to decide if I should walk down that aisle with the dress I was in or go back and change into something that didn't carry the scent of tension and cherry soda. But then I saw Darian. He was standing at the altar, calm, steady. He gave me a nod, not a big smile or a wave, just a nod that said, "We're still doing this, I'm here." That was enough. I took one last breath before stepping forward. My dress had been cleaned as best as it could be. There was still a faint mark, but it no longer screamed. And honestly, neither did I. As I walked down the aisle, I didn't look at Callista. I felt her. Her presence was sharp, cold. But I kept my eyes on the man I chose, the one who had stayed out of the drama but never left my side. Halfway down, I caught a whisper from someone seated near the aisle. I heard her mom gave her the necklace that was supposed to go to the other sister. Another voice, lower. Isn't this the same dress Callista wore to her own almost wedding? They weren't wrong. A few hours earlier, just as the final touches were being done on my makeup, Verity had stepped into the room with a small velvet box in hand. "This is for you," she said, almost casually, as if she were passing me a wrapped sandwich. I opened it. Inside was the gold locket I'd seen around Callista's neck for years, a Braun family heirloom, meant to be passed down to the one who carries the name with grace, my grandmother used to say. Verity had always implied it would go to Callista, because as she often said, she carries herself like a Braun should. I looked up from the locket and said nothing. Verity smiled faintly. "This belonged to Callista first, but it looks okay on you." I held it in my hand for a moment, letting the weight of it settle. Then I closed the box and handed it back. "I think you gave it to the right daughter the first time," I said, not unkindly. Her mouth opened like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. Instead, she simply nodded, slipped it back into her purse, and walked away. That was 3 hours ago, and the silence between us had held since then. Now, as I reached the altar, Darian took my hand. "You good?" he whispered. "I want to marry you," I replied. "Not survive her." He smiled. "Then let's get it done." The officiant began. His voice was warm and practiced. The breeze nudged the leaves above us gently. Everything around me looked exactly the way it was supposed to. But inside, I was buzzing. Every word of the ceremony blurred. I heard the laughter of guests during a light joke, the clinking of glasses behind us, the subtle shift of someone adjusting their heels on gravel. But most of all, I heard my own heartbeat, steady and slow, like a metronome marking the end of something old. At the moment of vows, I cleared my throat. My voice didn't shake. I've allowed others to narrate my story. I've stayed silent to keep peace that never existed. But today, I speak. And I choose you, not because you fix me, but because you see me. You don't shrink me. You stand beside me. There was a stillness after I finished. Not awkward, not dramatic, just still, like everyone was holding their breath for something they didn't expect. Darian said his vows, simple, beautiful. Then we exchanged rings. The officiant pronounced us husband and wife. There was applause, smiles, hugs. For a moment, it felt like I had finally made it, like I had crossed some invisible line from tolerated to seen. But of course, that feeling didn't last long. As we made our way to the reception area, still in the same garden space, just a few steps away, I noticed Callista had repositioned herself. She was now standing near the cake table, a flute of champagne in one hand, and something unreadable in her expression. I stayed close to Darian, thanking guests, shaking hands, accepting compliments. Then came Marla, my longtime friend and unofficial maid of honor. "She's been pacing," Marla whispered, "not talking to anyone, just watching." "She's not done," I said. Marla looked at me. "Do you want me to say something?" "No, I'll handle it." 10 minutes later, as Darian stepped away to greet his uncle, I felt a shift behind me. I turned. Callista was standing just a few feet away, eyes locked on the cake. "You look surprisingly composed," she said, her tone casual but clipped. I didn't respond. She stepped closer. "The dress suits you, even with the stain." I looked her in the eye. "You tried, and you failed. That's what stains do. They fade." She tilted her head. "You think this is over?" "I think you're used to being the headline, but you're just the footnote now." Her jaw tightened. I stepped away. Back into the center of the celebration, back into a life that for the first time felt like mine. She was waiting by the arch, like a storm dressed in silk. And I knew then, without a doubt, that we hadn't reached the end of anything. This wasn't her surrender, it was her reload. As the guests finished taking their seats and the officiant adjusted the lapel mic, I stood just out of view, hidden behind a panel of lattice and ivy. I could feel the weight of eyes beyond the floral arrangements, the hush settling in like morning fog. The ceremony music was seconds from beginning. My breath was calm, not because I wasn't nervous, but because something in me had gone still, resigned, maybe, or resolved. Before I stepped out, Marla slipped beside me. She leaned in close, keeping her voice low. "Did you ever get the charm your grandmother left you?" I blinked. "What?" "The silver pendant," she said. "She wanted you to wear it today, remember? You said she left it in that small wooden box?" I froze. My chest tightened, not with panic, but something colder. Calculation. "No, it wasn't in the gift table setup." "Are you sure?" "Because I asked the planner and she said she never saw it." I didn't have to guess where it went. I knew. That charm had been the only thing of my grandmother's I truly wanted. A quiet gift passed down to me in private, the week before she passed. She told me it belonged to women who didn't ask permission to be themselves. I was supposed to wear it today, tucked close to my heart, not because anyone would see it, but because I would know it was there. Now, it wasn't. And I knew exactly who had taken it. Marla touched my elbow gently. "Do you want me to?" "No," I said. "I'll do it." There wasn't much time. The guests were already glancing toward the entrance, phones gripped discreetly in laps, eager to capture that first moment. I turned on my heel and made my way toward the dressing tent, where Callista had been keeping her extra shoes, her purse, and, as I suspected, her sense of control. She was standing near the mirror, reapplying lipstick that didn't need touching up. She looked up when she saw me, pausing only for a beat. "Don't worry," she said. "I didn't touch your seat cards this time." "Where is it?" I asked flatly. Her brows arched, faux innocent. "I'm sorry?" "The charm. Grandma's. The silver one." "Oh," she said, dragging out the syllable. I found it lying around and figured it might get lost in the shuffle. I was doing you a favor." "You mean hiding it," I said. "I mean protecting your image," she replied smoothly. "It didn't match the neckline of your dress anyway. It would have looked forced." "Funny," I said. "That's what people said about your engagement to Brent." Her eyes narrowed and the smile vanished. "That's low," she snapped. "No, you're low. And I'm done playing at sea level." I turned to leave, but she wasn't done. "You really think putting on a white dress and saying I do erases what you are?" I turned back to face her. "No, but standing here calling you out, that does." At that exact moment, A hand appeared gently on my shoulder. Darian. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. He stood next to me, facing Callista, with a look that was neither hostile nor polite, just firm. Callista opened her mouth, perhaps to speak, perhaps to snap, but Darian raised a hand. Callista, he said, voice steady. You can leave now or be removed. You choose. She laughed softly. Seriously? You're going to threaten the bride's sister? On the day? I'm protecting the bride's peace, he replied. It's long overdue. For a second, no one moved. I watched her eyes flick between us, me in my dress, Darian in his tailored suit, and saw the flicker of panic she tried to hide. She hadn't planned for this. She never planned for anyone to call her out directly. Callista set her lipstick down with just a little too much force, then smoothed her dress. I'll see you out there, she said, walking past us without another glance. When she was gone, I exhaled. Slow, long, deeper than I meant to. Darian looked at me. Still want to do this? I want to do this more than ever, I said. We walked back together, returning to the archway just as the final chords of the opening music began. The officiant nodded at us, waiting for our signal. I stepped up to the center, took Darian's hand in mine, and for the first time that day, allowed myself to feel what this was really about. Beginning. The ceremony was simple, no dramatic gestures, no choreographed surprises, just two people choosing each other in a space filled with people who may not fully understand what we had survived to get here. When it was time to speak, I didn't use notes. I spent a long time trying to be small enough to fit into other people's ideas of me, I said. But you never asked me to shrink. You just stood beside me and waited for me to grow into my own voice. Darian's eyes didn't move from mine. I don't marry you because you complete me, I continued. I marry you because you see me, all of me, and still choose to stand here. The officiant smiled. Darian's vows were short, strong, just like him. And when we were pronounced husband and wife, the applause felt different than I expected. Not loud, not explosive, just real. As the guests began making their way toward the reception tables, I turned to walk with Darian, my hand still wrapped in his. The sky had shifted to a warm amber, the kind that made everything feel like an old photograph. But the moment couldn't stay quiet for long. I saw her move from the shadows near the bar, cutting diagonally through the crowd with a drink in her hand. Her expression wasn't readable, not anger, not joy, something else, focused. She was walking toward the cake and toward me. She took one step toward the cake, and that was one step too far. I saw her hand tighten around the glass before anyone else did, a tall, narrow glass filled to the brim with something dark. My body reacted before my brain caught up. Every part of me went still, like I'd been trained for this moment without knowing it. The crowd was softening. Laughter in the corners, the clink of forks against dessert plates, the gentle rhythm of a jazz trio playing under twinkling patio lights. It was supposed to be the breath after the plunge, the first real moment Darian and I could enjoy being married. Instead, time slowed, the music dissolved, my feet didn't move, and Callista kept walking. She crossed the gravel path with the poise of someone used to attention. Her dress, a deep plum silk, shimmered under the lights. Her heels clicked like punctuation. And when she was close enough for the world to see us in the same frame, me in white, her in that signature shade of control, she lifted her glass and in one swift motion tossed its contents square across my chest. Gasps. Real ones. Unfiltered. From my father. From Darian's aunt. From the waiter who had just begun clearing plates from the head table. The cold splash hit my skin before my mind processed what was happening. Sticky. Sharp. The smell told me before my eyes confirmed it. Cola. Not just spilled. Slammed. My dress soaked in seconds. The bodice clung to me. Satin darkened into shame. Callista stood in front of me, smiling faintly. Oops. I didn't move. I didn't reach for a napkin. I didn't speak. A collective silence held the air hostage. Then, slowly, she tilted her head and said louder, "You always take what you didn't earn." That was it. She stepped closer. Her voice, sharp enough to slice, cut through the garden like a blade. You've never deserved to be the center of anything, Lunette. Not this wedding, not this man, not this life. You let everyone else do the work, and then you show up when it's time for the photos. That's what you are, a photo op. My mother stood off to the side, hands clasped but unmoving. Not a word from her, just that familiar, tight-lipped look of a woman trained never to take sides publicly. Darian had frozen midway through walking back from greeting his cousin. His jaw was clenched. I knew if I looked at him too long I might break, so I didn't. The microphone, left accidentally live on a nearby speaker, caught it all. Her words echoed through the yard like church bells signaling the end of something sacred. Callista wasn't done. I built this wedding, she shouted. I fixed the seating chart. I adjusted the color scheme. I reworked your guest list so it wouldn't be a disaster. And you think you can just show up, smile, and pretend you did this? I finally blinked, not because I was shocked, but because I wasn't. Not anymore. Marla, standing near the AV table, moved. Quick, quiet, decisive. She reached into her purse, pulled out her phone, and in one motion, plugged it into the speaker system. There was static, then her voice, Callista's voice, from a recording, clear and unmistakable. I don't care if it's her wedding. I'm going to destroy her moment. Gasps again, louder this time. A ripple of disbelief moved through the guests. Callista's face turned from triumph to confusion to horror in the span of a breath. She stepped back. That's out of context. You don't understand. But the damage was done. The audio was clean. The intent was clear. The woman who had positioned herself as the family's savior had just confessed, in her own voice, to trying to ruin her sister's day. I looked at her then. Really looked. And I didn't see power. I saw desperation. She had spent so long building her image that when it cracked, there was nothing behind it but noise. I didn't yell. I didn't lunge. I didn't cry. I took a step forward, my dress still wet, still clinging. And I said, calmly and clearly, you didn't break me. You just showed them who you really are. No one clapped. No one needed to. A guest, someone I didn't even recognize, stepped forward and handed me a napkin. Another patted my arm gently. Someone else turned away from Callista, shaking their head. One by one, the tide turned. Callista looked around and saw it too. The shift, the subtle rejection. No yelling, no confrontation, just space opening between her and the people she once counted on. Her hands curled at her sides, her mouth opened, then closed. And then security appeared, quiet, professional, respectful. We need to ask you to step aside, ma'am, one of them said. She didn't move. Instead, she looked at me and hissed, This isn't over. You don't deserve any of this. I didn't hesitate. I turned to her and replied, not loud, but loud enough. You're right. I earned it. The stillness afterward wasn't awkward. It was final. As they escorted her away, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt free, not because I won, but because I no longer cared if she understood. You're right. I earned it, and you just lost everything. The moment those words left my mouth, something shifted. Not in her, but in the people around her. Callista looked back once as hotel security took her arm, just once, a half turn of the head. Maybe she thought someone would step in. Maybe she still believed there was a part of our mother that would rush forward, defend her, say, she didn't mean it. But Verity never moved. Not a twitch, not a word, not even a flinch. The guests were quiet. Eyes followed Callista's retreat, but nobody said her name. Her shoes scraped against the gravel in a rhythm that sounded almost unfamiliar. And as she disappeared behind the garden hedge, escorted without force, without fanfare, I felt the first true silence of the night. Not empty, not awkward, just settled. 2 days passed before I opened the manila folder. It had been sitting on my kitchen table, beside Darian's keys and the little gift bag someone had left with a card reading, You deserve joy. I hadn't touched the folder because I wanted the wedding to be the last page. But I knew better. This isn't revenge, I told myself. This is closure. This is documentation. This is reality. Odessa Harlow's office was quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes from years of handling things people wish they didn't have to see. She wore a navy pantsuit, glasses perched at the end of her nose, and an expression that said she didn't waste time on maybes. "You've got a case," she said after reviewing the videos, audio, and written statements. "Actually, you've got 3. "I'm not here to ruin her," I said. "I'm just done pretending it didn't happen." She nodded. "Good, because courts don't respond to emotional stories. They respond to patterns, proof, and public interest. You have all 3. By the following week, the paperwork had been filed: civil claims, restraining order requests, and a digital backup of everything stored on encrypted cloud drives. Odessa moved fast. Still, I didn't expect the next part to come so soon. 3 weeks after the wedding, I was invited to speak briefly at a nonprofit fundraiser. It was the same organization I'd volunteered with for years, focused on women's housing and workplace reentry. They asked if I'd do a short thank you speech, maybe introduce a client speaker. Of course, I said yes. The event was held at a renovated community center in East Austin. Nothing fancy. Folding chairs, buffet-style catering, string lights wrapped around exposed beams. It felt like home. Leonie was there, too, the MC from the wedding. We'd stayed in touch since. She still wore a wrap around her left wrist, recovering from a minor fracture she got helping break up the chaos at the reception. She smiled and waved when she saw me, and I waved back. Around 7:40 p.m., I was called toward the front of the room. Just a 5-minute segment, no big speech, just gratitude, encouragement, presence. I walked up with my note cards in one hand, the other clutching the pendant I finally got back. Yes, the one Callista had taken and claimed she misplaced. Odessa's team had found it in a sealed envelope during their legal prep, recovered and returned. That's what I carried with me now, a small silver circle that reminded me who I was before anyone else had the chance to define me. I was halfway to the microphone when the scream came. It wasn't loud. Not yet. It was more like a gasp. Sharp. Shocked. Sliced through the air like glass breaking. Then a second scream. And then chaos. A splash hit the floor near the podium. Leonie had been just a few feet in front of me. She had turned to wave again. The liquid hit her back and shoulder, fast and direct. Steam, not smoke, not water vapor, but something else, rose from the fabric of her blouse. She dropped to her knees. People yelled. Someone shouted, "Call 911!" Another yelled for water. Darian, across the room, sprinted to reach me. I turned, and there she was. Callista. Hair pulled back in a low bun, hood from her sweatshirt still half covering her head. In her right hand, a glass bottle with jagged plastic edges. She had missed. She was aiming for me. I moved toward Leonie. Darian blocked me halfway and guided me behind a pillar. 2 guests, men I barely knew, grabbed Callista as she tried to flee. One of them wrestled the bottle from her hand. She shrieked, not in pain but rage, like a child denied a toy she'd always assumed was hers. When the police arrived, she was still shouting, still insisting it was just soda, still pretending it wasn't real. But Leonie was in the back room now. EMTs surrounded her. The damage wasn't life-threatening, they said later, but it was visible. Red, raw. What mattered most was this. It wasn't hidden anymore. Callista wasn't just angry, she was dangerous. And now, the world saw it too. 2 months later, I sat in a courtroom. Travis County Courthouse, room 312. Neutral walls, scratchy benches, a buzzing fluorescent light that flickered every 7 seconds like a nervous tick. She walked in wearing beige, not her usual power colors, no lipstick, no jewelry, just silence. Odessa sat beside me, calm and focused. Verity, our mother, was not present. She had sent a note to the court stating health complications. Truthfully, I think she just couldn't face it. Callista pled not guilty. The prosecution played the recording from the wedding again, then showed photos from the charity event. They played the security footage. The crowd listened. Some averted their eyes. Others stared straight ahead, like if they blinked, they'd missed the part where things finally made sense. When it was my turn to speak, I said this. She didn't just try to ruin my wedding. She tried to erase me. And when she couldn't, she tried to hurt me. And she hurt someone else instead. This isn't about a family fight. This is about safety, mine, others. And the truth finally having a voice. Odessa nodded slightly. Not because I said it well, but because it was true. The jury deliberated for just under 2 hours. When the judge returned to the bench, everything stopped. Judge Alora Kane, a woman with silver hair pulled into a tight twist, spoke with no hesitation. Miss Braun, you are sentenced to 8 years in state prison for attempted aggravated assault and public endangerment. There was no applause. Callista sobbed once, loud, then quiet. I didn't move, because there was nothing left to say. A week after the sentencing, a letter arrived. No return address. Just my name. Careful handwriting. Familiar. I didn't open it. I placed it in the top drawer of my nightstand, beside the photo of my grandmother and the charm I wore under my dress. Some stories don't need to be rewritten. They just need to end. Some stories don't need to be rewritten. They just need to end. That letter stayed in the drawer. I didn't touch it again. It sat between a dried lavender sachet and a photo of my grandmother holding me when I was 5, wearing an apron and flour-dusted hands, mid-laugh. That photo reminded me who taught me how to love without asking to be loved back. The sachet kept the drawer smelling like peace. Callista's handwriting was unmistakable, the same tight loops and slanted letters from our childhood notes left on the fridge. I borrowed your jacket. Deal with it. This time, the envelope was formal. No return address. No stamp. Hand-delivered, probably by someone paid to not ask questions. It didn't matter. Some things need to stay unsaid. Some wounds heal best without salt or sugar. That letter could have been an apology. It could have been another excuse. Either way, it didn't change anything. Not anymore. 6 months had passed. I lived in a new apartment now. Smaller, simpler, brighter. No grand view, but I didn't need one. We had a balcony with 2 chairs. A row of succulents lined the windowsill. None of them were dead yet, which felt like its own kind of success. Darian and I had a rhythm. Quiet mornings with coffee, unspoken glances over scrambled eggs, shared playlists while folding laundry. The kind of life I used to think was too quiet to count. Turns out, peace isn't loud. It's steady. My nonprofit work shifted. I was still involved, still showing up, but something new had grown from the chaos. A podcast. It started as a one-off interview about generational silence and somehow became a platform. We called it First Voice. It was for women who'd spent years biting their tongues in the name of keeping the family together. For people who'd been told, don't talk about that in front of your uncle. For the daughters who saw too much and said too little. I wasn't famous, but I didn't need to be. The emails came anyway. The voicemails. The quiet hands after community talks. At a local bookstore event, a woman my mother's age waited until the crowd thinned before she approached. She didn't buy my book. She just said, I listened to every episode. My sister hasn't spoken to me in 15 years, but hearing you, it made me realize I didn't deserve to be forgotten. And then she hugged me, not long, not tight, just enough. A few weeks later, a college student asked me the question I hadn't quite prepared for. Do you think she regrets it? Callista. Always Callista. I didn't flinch. I didn't pause. I don't know, I said. But I know I don't need her answer to keep walking. That was the truth. There were still days when I looked over my shoulder, at old patterns, at echoes of her voice saying, You really think that's your color? But they didn't have power anymore. Not unless I handed it to them, and I had no plans to. As for Verity, our mother, silence became her reply. She hadn't called, not after the trial, not when the podcast aired, not when my face appeared on the cover of a local magazine under the headline, The Quiet Fight That Changed Everything. I used to want her to reach out. To say she was wrong, that she saw it now, but absence can be its own kind of apology. I visited Leonie 2 months after the event. Her burns had healed well, faster than expected, The doctors were optimistic. Her skin was pink in patches but fading. She wore a scarf like armor, floral and defiant. We had tea in her garden, the one with wind chimes and a squirrel that liked to steal the pecans from her feeder. "You caught what was meant for me," I said. She smiled. "And I'd do it again, because you were worth protecting." I looked at her, tears threatening, but I blinked them away. "You shouldn't have had to." "No one should," she said. "But that's not how the world works. Sometimes it takes the wrong target for people to finally see." I remembered the moment I nearly sent a letter back to Callista. It was weeks after the trial. I'd written it in a single sitting, pouring every what if and if only I could think of. "I would have forgiven you if you had just stopped." But I didn't mail it. I didn't even keep it. I burned it in a shallow bowl on the patio. Watched the words curl into ash. Some truths aren't meant for mailboxes. They're meant to float away. At a recent community panel, a young woman with nervous fingers and a voice that shook asked me the hardest question of all. "How do you heal from a betrayal by someone you loved?" I answered carefully. "You don't wait for their apology. You give yourself a future without them in it. You love anyway. You trust again, slowly. And you learn the difference between forgiveness and access." The room was silent. Then someone clapped. Just one person. And it was enough. That night, I stood on my balcony as the sun dipped behind the Austin skyline. A plane crossed overhead, trailing a pink cloud, and the city lights flickered one by one like stars in reverse. She's still in prison. I'm not. That's not revenge, that's release. Sometimes justice doesn't come with grand gestures. It arrives quietly, through boundaries set, truth spoken, and doors gently closed. Lunette's story isn't just about a ruined wedding. It's about reclaiming your voice in a family that worked hard to silence it. Have you ever been treated like the outsider in your own family story? Share your experience in the comments. We read everyone. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories that hit close to home. Your voice matters here.